Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever noticed how someone can look incredibly successful on the outside, but they're literally paralyzed by anxiety on the inside? Okay, let's dive into this. Today we're exploring a super fascinating concept based on an insightful piece by an author named Salima. She had this huge realization that her outer success was completely masking a deep inner anxiety. So we're going to break down the actual architecture of our thoughts and look at how we can move from merely surviving to making true intentional progress.
To set this stage here, let's look at the author's own wake-up call. She was building this property business, right? She had the spreadsheets, the fancy plans, and she used the word goals all the time. But at 3 a.m., her thoughts weren't actually about growth at all. They were just pure panic. Stuff like, what if a tenant leaves? Or what if this month doesn't cover next month? And then it hit her. That isn't growth thinking. That is survival thinking wearing a blazer. You know, it looks totally professional on the outside, but underneath, it's driven entirely by fear.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core disconnect that ends up trapping so many of us. On one side, you have your outward reality, the assets, the steady income, all those tangible opportunities. But on the flip side, the inward mentality is a totally different story. It's rationing, it's constantly bracing for impact. It's that sneaking feeling that if you have a great, successful month, you're somehow going to have to repay the universe for it later. It's wild, right? You can have all the outward signs of stability and still mentally feel like you're standing on a trapdoor.
Section 1. The Framework. John C. Maxwell's 3 mental rooms.
So the first room is the survival room. When your mind is hanging out in this room, you aren't actually planning your future. You are quite literally just scanning the horizon for danger. Every single decision you make gets filtered through this absolutely exhausting question: what could go wrong? Your mental energy is entirely chewed up just monitoring for worst-case scenarios.
Then we move into the second room, which is the maintenance room. Now this one feels a lot quieter. Life is finally somewhat stable, so your entire mission shifts to just protecting that stability. The rules in this room are pretty simple. Don't rock the boat, and whatever you do, don't risk too much. From the outside, the maintenance room looks exactly like success, but on the inside, it quietly replaces your potential for growth with this overwhelming desire for preservation. You can spend years in this room without ever even realizing you've completely stopped expanding.
And finally, we reach the third room, the progress room. This room feels fundamentally different because your mental energy here is actually spent building what's next. Now, I want to be really clear. Progress doesn't ignore risk. It's not about being reckless, but it actively refuses to let fear become the architect of your decisions. It just requires a completely different mindset.
So the crucial point is this: your bank account can live in one room while your mind lives in an entirely different one. Survival mode isn't measured by what you own, what your job title is, or how much money you're making. It is measured exclusively by where your attention lives. Think about it. You could literally be sitting in a luxury apartment while your mind is just renting space inside worst-case scenarios.
Section 2. The Illusions of Safety. How fear disguises itself in our daily lives.
Now, what's really interesting about the slide is how these illusions actually operate to keep us stuck. The illusion of survival feels incredibly responsible, doesn't it? Fear basically masquerades as wisdom. Anxiety calls itself preparation. It tricks you into thinking that worrying is somehow productive. And then, the illusion of maintenance hides a complete lack of expansion by quietly disguising stagnation as success and stability. We tell ourselves we're just being smart and protective, but really, we're just hiding.
You can actually hear these illusions playing out in the internal monologues we all carry around in our heads. Just look at the stark contrast here. The maintenance monologue is entirely defensive. It's always asking, how do I protect what I have, or can I afford this? It's very restrictive. But the progress monologue, that is expansive. It asks questions like, what am I building next, and what would this make possible? It's a massive shift from just protecting your present to actively engineering your future.
Let's move to and see how this builds our perspective on risk. In the survival and maintenance rooms, you're stuck with the fear focus. What if it fails? And honestly, that question just paralyzes you. But over in the progress room, you adopt the responsibility focus. You ask, what if it works? And what is my responsibility in making it work? That completely flips the script. It reframes the fear of failure right into the responsibility of success, which forces you to step up.
Section 3. The Habit of Progress. Thinking is a practice, not a talent.
The really good news here is that none of these mental rooms are permanent. Great thinking isn't just some genetic lottery that a lucky few are born with. It's actually a compounding discipline. It's a lot like going to the gym.
One useful thought makes the very next useful thought just a little bit easier to grab onto. One courageous decision makes the next one slightly less terrifying. Just like skipping the gym can quietly turn into 6 months of sitting on the couch, one intentional thought, repeated over time, can quietly compound into an entirely different life.
So how exactly do we build this habit? Well, the author gives us a super simple, actionable move to practice this week. Step 1, just pause once each day. Catch yourself. Step 2, grab a thought you're having right in that moment and ask, okay, which room was that thought in? Was that survival, maintenance, or progress? And step 3, and listen, this is the absolutely crucial one. Notice it without criticizing yourself or trying to fix it immediately. Just observe. Because awareness is always the first doorway to transformation. You literally can't walk out of a room if you don't even realize you're standing in it.
Section 4. The Path Forward. The core questions that actively help you change rooms. This is really the climax of the explainer, because the most successful people out there regularly meet with themselves just to answer these exact core questions.
The very first question to pose to yourself is right here. What do you really want? Seriously, ask yourself that right now, and you have to answer it plainly. No shrinking, no apologizing for your ambition. Because here is the raw truth of it. Your imagination and your clarity absolutely cannot grow when your nervous system is constantly preparing for a disaster in survival mode. You have to give your mind the breathing room to honestly and openly answer this question. And once you figure out what you want, you have to face this really challenging follow-up question. Are you willing to pay the real price for it? Now notice we aren't talking about some fantasy price where everything just goes perfectly and the stars align. No, we are talking about the actual, raw, everyday cost of growth.
Because the reality is, that price is steep. It involves serious discipline and, honestly, immense discomfort. We're talking about delayed gratification. We're talking about initiating incredibly uncomfortable conversations. And perhaps the most challenging part of all, the real price involves massive identity shifts and a whole lot of unlearning. To finally step out of that survival room, you have to shed the protective armor you've been wearing for years. And let me tell you, doing that is profoundly uncomfortable.
To help you process all of this, here are 5 journal prompts pulled straight from the source material. Number 1, where does my thinking actually spend most of its time right now? 2, what careful habit of mine is actually just fear and a blazer? 3, if I genuinely believed my good months were a pattern and not just a fluke of luck, what decision would I make this week? 4, what do I really want without shrinking? And number 5, what is the real price of becoming the person who gets to live that life? I highly recommend taking a screenshot right here and bringing these into your daily reflection. We'll wrap up today's explainer with this absolutely powerful quote from the source. Your outer world is usually built long after your inner world has already been designed. So before you change your strategy, change the room you're thinking from. It's just such a profound reminder that all sustainable progress is an inside job first. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder today. If someone could somehow hook a speaker up to your brain and hear your internal thoughts right now, which room would they say you are decorating? Thank you so much for diving into this explainer with me, and I challenge you to go out and open a new door in your mind today.